Okay, well, let me hit mute. So I'm echoing back. Should I get off of Zoom? Just bear with me 1 minute. Technical, we're combining. I'm on mute. I'm just leaving the meeting. Okay. Okay. I just nobody wants to hear me that loud. So well, welcome everybody. I'm going to open up. I was stalling a few more minutes because my co-chair, my great co-chair, Senator Moore, she is driving here to be here in person, and I know that there was a large accident on the Merritt Parkway, so she will be joining us, and we're going to split out the agenda. But I'm just going to kick us off, and then when she comes and she joins us, we will let her take it from there. Does that sound like so I just want to ask everyone, just bear with us with the technical challenges sometimes we have some people who are in person, we have some people who are zooming. We're trying to still be respectful of those who would like to participate from afar, but through the virtual world we've figured it all out. So I think what I'd like to do is just open up first of all, then talk about what this is. This is our Connecticut food. It's a task force for food insecurity. This came out of Bill 5146, and we'll be talking more about the history of that bill and what the goals of the committee are. I just want to start off by saying I'm very grateful to our leaders who made these appointments, because I think we have a really great group of folks who are participating in this task force. And I want to thank the members of the task force who have volunteered their time to be a part of this, because it's critical. I think we have a lot of great minds at the table. We have our supermarket association, we have our local resource organizations, we have our regional organizations, we have the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Public Health, Department of Consumer Protection, all coming together to figure out how do we help get excess food from supermarkets that is resourceable into the hands of those who are in need, and what is a more formal channel that we can put together to make sure that happens. So I'm going to start off by asking everybody to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with our folks that are here in person, and then we will move to Zoom. So to my left is Jason, and you guys can just take it away and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role and what you hope to expect from this task force
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Thank you, Representative. I'm Jason Jakubowski. I'm the president and CEO of Connecticut Food Share, an appointee of Senator Duff, and very happy to be here. The Connecticut Food Share is the Feeding America food bank for the entire state of Connecticut. We serve people in all 169 towns. We used to be two separate organizations, and about 2 years ago, we came together as one food bank. Our headquarters is in Wallingford. We have a satellite in Bridgeport and a satellite in Bloomfield. Obviously, the donated food market is something that is extremely important to us. Pre-pandemic, about 75% of our food was being donated by the food industry and by individuals out in the community. During the pandemic, we've had to purchase, and after the pandemic and post-pandemic, we've had to purchase significant amounts of food. And we know that continuing to purchase food at the rate that we are is just unsustainable. So we have a wonderful relationship with Connecticut's supermarkets. We've always found them to be very helpful. We've always found them to be very, very generous, and I think this is a great way of putting all the right people around the virtual table at least, and so that we can figure out a path forward and how to make this work for everybody. So very happy to be here.
Great, thank you. We're very happy to have you as well.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. My name is Julia Cajejas. I'm the interim executive director for End Hunger Connecticut. We are a statewide advocacy agency. We work with SNAP programs, and we do a lot of work with farmers markets, CT Fresh Match. And during the pandemic, we created a program to help pantries, to provide them more power to buy in bulk and a cheaper, reduced way, so they're able to keep their shelves full. During this program, we also found that a lot of pantries do not connect with each other. So there's no relation that sometimes a pantry within its same town connects with other pantries. So our program is to help them connect, able to get the resource together, combine it, maybe even rescue food together and then split it evenly, or help even store it correctly. So we're here to support Jason and what, CT Food Share does, but also help those that are not tied to Food Share.
Great, thank you. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you have a lot of statistics around hunger in Connecticut. Do you want to share some of those?
So right now there's about 600 pantries that we have discovered that are working and, together in a silo. So they, like what I said, they don't work together in the same town. They don't talk, communicate. It's all volunteer based. So because of this, we know that about 70% of the food that they do get comes to Connecticut Food Share. The other 30% has to be bought by them. Some of them are very limited budget, or some of it don't have enough to rescue because it's volunteer based. So if a grocery store calls midday or evening that, food is available, there might not be a resource for them to get the food. So that's one of our biggest kind of approach in how to connect, how to make them, unite. So they're able to rescue as much food, work with other agencies like us and Food Share, together. And then also the food that we're trying to rescue goes back into the summer meals programs, goes back to helping farmers, keep the pantries going too. So we're helping farmers by purchasing food that goes directly into the pantries itself.
Great, thank you. Thank you for
problem.
that. And we know that 1 in 8 children in Connecticut are food insecure. And that's an average. That's a Connecticut average. So we know that some communities, it's much more severe. It's 1 in 4 children. So that's why we're here. Okay, I think we're going to move to the Zoom, and let's see if we could do this in order. And I want to thank Samuel Clark, who is here, and he's going to be along for the ride with us and is really great support. So thank God he's here. Sam, do you want to, because I had to close down my Zoom, do you just want to queue up the names maybe on the?
So I believe they should just be appearing automatically when you call their name, or do you want me to announce them? I can definitely do that. Yes. So first, I would like to introduce Cynthia Costa.
Good morning. I'm with the Food Protection Program at the Connecticut Department of Public Health. I have been with food protection for almost 13 years and have been a certified food inspector in the state since 1994. So I've been in this field for a long time. The Food Protection Program, our view on this is that regardless of where they are in the community, they deserve safe food. So although we don't want food to be wasted, we also want to make sure that whatever they do get is safe to eat. So that will be our role here.
Thank you so much. And I know when we first met and talked about the task force, you were very excited to be a participant, and you've been working on this for many years. So I thank you for all of your work.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay. Next is Lori Martin.
Hi, good morning. I'm the executive director of Havens Harvest. We are a food recovery nonprofit. We come from the environmental side, like don't let the good food go to waste. But we also focus on getting food into communities that suffer from food insecurity. And we're based in New Haven, but we also work in the Valley and recently in New London. We do focus on perishable and prepared foods because it takes a bit of a hustle. It's good food. It's often nutrient dense. And it's food we can get right into the community. We work with all the universities in the area around New Haven and Conn College. We do move the food quickly. I know it'd be Cynthia's concern. I mean, we don't move food far. When the food's coming off from the university in New Haven, we mostly move it to the perimeter of its campus. So, and most of the food gets moved closer than grocery stores are to these folks. So we do move food that way. We work with free fridges, the free fridge here in New Haven. We work with faith communities, daycare centers, schools. We don't bank food. And in the last couple of years, we've rescued 1.5 million pounds of food each year. So there's good food that's going to waste. We feel like we can be working in conjunction with food banks because we don't bank food. And our hustle is the prepared foods that are harder for other places to use, but we can get it right into the community so that people can get fed.
Thank you so much, Lori. And Lori is actually the person who introduced me to food rescuing a few years ago. We do, I participate in a food rescue run every Friday morning. And Lori has continually stressed the importance of making sure the food is of nutritional value. So it's not cakes and bread and donuts, that it's fruits and vegetables, and really falls within the pyramid. And Lori was appointed by our majority leader, Jason Rojas. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Jordan Coe.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am the president and co-owner of Waverly Markets. It's a family-owned and operated business. My family owns 3 ShopRite supermarkets, Manchester, East Hartford, and Vernon. 4th generation in the food business. I've been feeding people a long time. I was also nominated by Majority Leader Rojas, and one of our chief priorities in our organization is battling food insecurity. We have a robust relationship with FoodShare, but also with many local food pantries, and we have for generations. I think that, I'm very excited to be a part of this, to hear some of the concerns and to hear some of the challenges in the community and see how we can, sort of battle that together. I'm very concerned about food safety and sanitation. And because we already do this, hopefully we can provide some context and just be a great partner in, continuing this fight. ShopRites are part of a buying co-op called Wakefern Food Corporation in New Jersey. We are all individually owned and operated by families. And so also with our co-op, we have many resources, and again, have been doing this for a very long time. So I'm looking forward to being with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And we're glad you're a part of this task force.
All right, up next, Reginald St. Colin.
Morning. My name is Reggie. I'm from Bridgeport, a series of community fridges around Connecticut. I think they're Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford, and one's being built in Waterbury. Reach about 1,300 people a week through donations. We get about 3 to 5 tons of food a week, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I'm here to, I guess, work in collaboration with everyone and help build a strong system in which, in which everyone gets fed. Sorry, it's kind of early, so I'm all frazzled. We're not a nonprofit, we're a mutual aid group. So it's a bunch, just like 50, 60 people around the state just working in collaboration through group chats and whatnot. And effectively our mission is to work ourselves into obsolescence. We don't want to be around. We're working to, solve hunger, not make our organization stronger. And I hope we're able to do that through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. And I also want to point out that Reggie was very instrumental when we were working on this bill. And we've met with him a few times and had a lot of information around the New York legislation and made a lot of contributions, and does a great job in Bridgeport. So thank you, Reggie.
Okay, up next is Mr. Mike Siegel.
You're muted.
Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I think the reason I'm on this task force is because I was the author of the New York law. The New York law, the guts of it is that every supermarket makes excess edible food available to food relief organizations. It doesn't tell supermarkets how to do it or when to do it. Supermarkets were never in the ordinary course of their business under whatever standards they use, put stuff on the back dock. You know, most supermarkets have a back dock where the trucks bring the food in that they're going to sell, and in the same back dock they put the food that for one reason or another they've taken off their shelves to be disposed of. And so the law says whenever the supermarket does that, in whatever standards they use, if a food relief organization wants it, they have to make it available to let the food relief organization pick it up, as opposed to having a carting company pick it up for about, I don't know, $100, $110 a ton and taking it to a landfill, and where it does the wonderful thing of creating poisonous gases. The New York law also is explicit that it does not supersede any state or federal health laws or regulations regarding the handling of food. The history of this, very briefly, is it's modeled after the French law. The French law, my wife found out about from her family and friends. I met with the legislator that wrote the French law, and came back to the U.S. I adopted it to U.S. legislation. I've written legislation before I've written federal legislation, it passed the New York Assembly, that's equivalent of your House of Representatives, with only 2 dissenting votes. It passed the French Parliament with no dissenting votes. The right, the left, there was not a single dissenting vote in the French Parliament. In the New York Assembly, there was only 2. And I think the vote in the New York Senate was 48-12. There's been no partisan issues that have, in my experience, there were no partisan issues that ever came up with regard to this. There was no opposition from the food industry in the state of New York to this. No, in fact, no one's ever really said there's anything wrong with it that I've heard. The issues that have come up under the New York legislation are primarily who's going to enforce it. And our view was, which the New York State legislature accepted, that News 12 enforces it. That if some supermarket doesn't want to give food, all you need is the News 12, truck to show up, and that gets corrected pretty quickly. So there's no issue of the government having to get involved in with the cost and the hassle of enforcement. So I'd be happy to send to Samuel, if the group wanted, a copy of the New York law. It's on 1 page. It's very short. I'm sure it's not perfect. It can be improved upon, but it's working well in New York. I only know of 2 instances in New York where supermarkets said, gee, we don't know about the law. And then a call from a local assemblyman, called the supermarket, the owner of the supermarket or the manager, and the next day food was flowing. I mean, there haven't been any problems that I'm aware of. So if the group would like, I'm happy to send it to Samuel and he can distribute it.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I also want to point out that your appointing authority was Representative Vinnie Candelaria. And
Yes.
Sounds like you've been a pioneer in this field for many years. So certainly value the input that you will bring to the table for this task force. And thank you for being here. And we do want to hear more about the New York law and how it's working, and any obstacles. It doesn't sound like there was many, but we'll get into that a little bit more after intros, when we get into the nuts and bolts. And I didn't mention also, or maybe I did, that Reggie was appointed by Senator Bob Duff, and Jordan, we said, was Jason Rojas. I'd just like to say who appointed whom, so that we give credit to our legislative leaders who have really focused on this issue. Okay, Sam, who do we have next?
So another member of this task force is the commissioner for the Department of Agriculture, Brian Hurlbert, but he was unable to attend. So today, so I believe he appointed a designee to represent him today, and her name is Jamie L. Smith.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Smith. I'm the Bureau Director for Agricultural Development and Resource Conservation, and here on behalf of Commissioner Hurlbert. Our agency has been instrumental during the COVID pandemic with regard to emergency feeding and gathering entities throughout the state of Connecticut to get together in a unified fashion and talk about and understand what everyone is doing. In addition to facilitating the conversations, we've also been extremely instrumental in funding opportunities to procure Connecticut grown food to support our Connecticut farmers and bringing very nutritious, healthy food into our emergency feeding system. So I look forward to hearing from the conversation where our role could potentially continue and how we can support the folks here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. And I think that's one of the other great things that's going to come out of this task force is we'll really learn what everybody's doing, right? So I think somebody mentioned the work is a bit in silos. So it's great to hear what each other is doing. So in order to connect the dots, we need to be aware of what we need to connect. So thank you for being here, Department of Agriculture. And I think we have the Department of Consumer Protection on as well.
Yes, we do. And so the designee for the DCP was Virginia, and I also believe Leslie O'Brien, apart from DCP, is on as well.
I can introduce myself. I don't know, Leslie. Good morning. My name is Virginia Venzano. I'm with the Department of Consumer Protection. I've been with the department going on 15 years. I'm with the Food Standards and Product Safety Division, and my chief role is in manufactured food, but consumer protection, we also regulate grocery stores, all packaged foods in Connecticut. And our role is similar to DPH in the fact that, are really concerned about food safety, but also food insecurity. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And Leslie's on as well.
Hi, Leslie O'Brien from DCP. I'm the legislative director. I'm actually just here to support Virginia, who's the commissioner's appointee, and to watch. Thank you for allowing me to do so.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for all the work that you do. And I think that concludes our introduction. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Wayne from the Supermarket Associations couldn't be here, but I think there's a designee. Is that correct, Sam?
I believe so. If Wayne's designee is here, please appear. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Maggie Bussell, and we're part of the Connecticut Food Association, and we represent grocery stores in Connecticut and distributors, wholesalers, brokers, and so on and so forth. And so we are the voice of all the customers of the grocery stores, and we also partner with Connecticut Food Share, and really excited to be part of this group and to hear how we can help everybody out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and participating. And now I'm going to turn it over to my great co-chair, Senator Moore, who just so happens the two of us co-chair the bonding subcommittee together. So we work really well together, and we have had a focus on food insecurity through our bonding work as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But Marilyn?
Well, it kind of looks like we've coordinated outfits today too. So good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I actually asked to be on this task force. I've been doing food work for the past 14 years, working with Food Solutions New England and the Connecticut Food Alliance. And this is right up my alley, looking at food equity, sustainability of food. And I love that what someone said, nutritious, healthy food, to make sure we're getting the right food to the people, but also we're culturally sensitive to what we provide people. I chair Human Services. I'm finishing my 8 years as a senator. I live in Bridgeport. I visited a couple of weeks ago, a farm in Trumbull, Connecticut, that I also represent. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I think it's really an important issue. I just received a book in the mail yesterday, No Farms, No Food. So everything is aligned. So looking forward to this. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to working with Representative Borer. I'm so happy. I'm waiting to hear about this New York uh, legislation. So I think that's a great idea to make sure we all see it. We can model, perhaps we could model some of the things that we do based on what was done in New York. And I'm anxious to meet Mr. Siegel. I'll be down in Greenwich. There's something you're having soon on food. So look forward to what's coming. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Moore.
You're on mute, Mike.
We went a little bit out of order with the introductions and just want to talk a little bit about the history of the bill. It was Bill 5146, and this is what got us to this point. And I want to again thank Lori Martin and Reggie, because they had come to me and said, you know, we are food rescue organizations, but the flow is not always consistent. We don't necessarily have the support for the infrastructure. And we know there's a lot of excess food that we can get into the hands of those who need it. So this went through the General Law Committee, and the reason it went through the General Law Committee is General Law has cognizant over consumer protection. So it didn't go through environment. It didn't go through the Department of Public Health. It was really General Law. So a couple of things the bill did was, well, two main things. One was to create the task force of all the members that we have just met, and really with the goal, the stated goal of connecting supermarkets to organizations for the excess food. The other thing we put in this bill was a protection of liability for the supermarkets. And that's something we heard from the supermarket organizations, that even though there's a national law, Good Samaritan law, that protects from donations, they wanted us to codify it into the Connecticut statute. So that was an obstacle that was removed for any hesitation for donating food. We want it to be safe, but we also want there to be no hesitation, because there's no hesitation to donating that safe food because of fear of the liability. So it was two main components of this bill. This bill was not originally bipartisan when it first went through general law. We had a lot of public debate. We had a lot of input, but we got together and we took a step back and we said, you know, we think we need to have a task force to really look at this. We can't simply dictate what supermarkets should do. Or what the organizations should do. Let's take a step back and let's all talk about it. And no, if we're going to be asking supermarkets to donate more, we also want to make sure that infrastructure is there to handle it, and who's going to handle it. So that's how we created the task force. And then through that work on the bill, it did become bipartisan. So passed out of the House and out of the Senate with full bipartisan support and was signed off by the governor. So that's why it went through general law, and that's how we got to where we are. Let's see, anything else in the bill? No, those are the two basic highlights. And so a couple of things in the goals of the task force, besides the bill, which talks about the connection, we also, Senator Moore and I, as bonding chairs, knowing that this work was also coming down the pike, we also added $10 million to bond authorizations to support capital infrastructure for organizations that are doing rescue. And that was because during the process of talking about the bill, and we said, well, is everybody going to be able to handle the influx of excess food? We started hearing from organizations, maybe we need more refrigeration, maybe we need more transportation, maybe we need more facilities. So we put that $10 million in, which has been assigned to the Department of Agriculture, who will eventually come up with a grant program to disseminate those funds across the state. But one of the tasks of this task force is to help come up with the criteria and the framework for how that grant process should look. So based on your input as to how you think it would be best served in the community is one of the other goals of this task force. So the task force connecting supermarkets, but also how do we define how to disseminate that $10 million? And the third thing that we talked about during the process of creating this bill was how do we eliminate waste to begin with? And there was a lot of conversation about labeling. And I know that's a federal labeling laws are federal issues, but if there's something that we can determine as far as education of the public around label laws, I think we'd have a lot less food waste to begin with. So anything we could do in that area as well. So those are the goals. And I'm going to turn it back over to my co-chair to start talk about next steps.
Thank you. Well, you all have a copy of the bill, and the bill really does define what the next steps are and what we have to accomplish. What we need to think about is, do we need to create work groups to work specifically on specific areas, and how frequently will we meet? I had spoken to Representative Bora earlier, and we thought that we should meet every 2 weeks. Perhaps every 2 weeks would be good. But also, I'd like to hear, I'm the type of person who likes to be in the mix, but I want to hear from the partners on how you see this flowing and what's good for you. And can you identify some areas that we may need to break out and have specific conversations about? So if anybody would like to share some of their ideas of what they see to meet the goals of the task force, I'm interested in hearing from everyone. So all voices are heard and we all participate and we're all invested in this. I can't tell if anybody wants to speak. Yes.
And I can definitely give you my 2 cents, Senator. Definitely, I think there's a few things. One common theme that came through the introductions was food safety. And I think that's something very important. I know Representative Bora, we discussed that during with you and your colleagues on a bipartisan basis as you were putting together this bill. We in the food banking business, and I understand many of the supermarkets are as well, we are in a very heavily regulated industry, and rightfully so, by the way. Everybody deserves not just food, they deserve nutritious food and they deserve safe, edible food. So that is definitely, I don't know if I would say it's a constraint, but it's a reality. We are heavily regulated by state, federal standards, and obviously Feeding America standards and other types of safety standards. We actually have have an audit coming up next month from AIB in terms of our facility, making sure our storage, temperature, et cetera, is where it's supposed to be. I think the other thing that I always think of too is that we've got a lot of great partners around the I do think, this doesn't always happen with task forces, but we do have all the right people. I think you have all the right people around the table, or all the right groups around the table. And I think figuring out a way for us to achieve a common goal without reinventing the wheel 169 times is something that we've got to just keep in mind as well. How do we double down on the things that we know are working, and how do we potentially invest in some of the things that we think could work a little better? So those are just my 2 thoughts in terms of listening to everybody.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. You're you're like, Food Chair is like an icon, right? That we can look to. You've been through everything, hard times, good times, right? And weathered it. And you have a great reputation. So I'm interested in hearing that point of view.
We appreciate those thoughts very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment about what they think there should be whether there should be a work group, or has any ideas on what we have to make sure that we have to cover?
Well, I could.
Mr. Siegel.
Senator Moore, actually, before I give you my thoughts on that, Representative Fiorello called me this morning, and Kim wants to arrange a meeting at the new, where Jason was yesterday, at this wonderful new Greenwich Neighbor to Neighbor on Monday afternoon. So I don't know if you are potentially available to see that or not, if you wanted to come see that. But my thoughts are basically, as you and Representative Boer have outlined, it seems to me there's 3 or 4 task subcommittees would be a good idea. One could be for the legislation on matching supermarkets' excess food to the need. Another would be for the standards for the bonding, and another could be on how to reduce food waste. I mean, those would be 3 kind of, based on what you and Representative Boer said, those would be kind of 3 natural subcommittees, and people on this group seem to have lots of expertise in those areas. If you wanted to do those subcommittees along those lines, I would certainly ask, I'd be willing obviously to serve on the legislation one on how to match the food with the need. I would ask Jordan if she would be on that subcommittee, because she owns major, the family owns major supermarkets.
Thank you. I'll talk to you offline about coming down. I'll get your contact information and give you a call. I am coming down for something you're having. I was trying to figure out when it is. I know you're doing something soon, and I had planned on coming down to meet. So we'll try and arrange that. I think you point out right now we've got 4 great places: food safety, legislation, and I think the legislation would be the very last committee, because we gather all of the information and then figure out where do we need to be. But the food waste and the standards for the bonding, I agree. I'll talk to more with my co-chair to understand, is that what we need to do, and if there are any other ideas. So thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I think we have 2 hands raised, both Lori Martin and Reggie.
Lori Martin.
Good morning, thank you. One of the pieces we've discussed before is educating, and Jordan may know all this, educating grocers about what can be donated. And I think that piece is really important. I remember in February when we had the public hearing, Molly Devins was really clear about what they do in their process, and perhaps Jordan's stores have a similar process, but that's really key. For our perspective, we want a 0 food waste goal. So that means, composted or used for fuel if it can't be eaten by folks. And it's one of the things, and Jason's heard me talk about this, but I always talk about the roasted chickens. So sometimes grocery stores donate food to food banks, but the roasted chickens aren't necessarily a good match for the food banks. Right? There's too much time if they've got a middle ground, or if they're going directly to some of the food bank partners, that's not a good match because their pantry isn't for a day or 2. But when the last mile folks, for instance, Havens Harvest is picking up food, we're getting the food, in the morning or in the evening, and that food's going directly to people. That's their next meal. So that piece, as an environmental standpoint, we feel like that's the most important piece around educating the stores. So they know that food can be donated in a safe way, Cynthia. But that stuff is, we need to learn. I think we need to re-educate ourselves as a culture about what things don't need to be thrown away. I guess that would be the biggest piece that I would want considered.
Thank you, Lori. I just had a conversation about this. What goes where, and did it need to be refrigerated? Is it overnight food? Does it need to be consumed right away? And I think that education for grocers could perhaps come under the food safety piece, that we could link those together. So thank you. And there's another person waiting.
Yeah.
Reggie.
Yeah, I want to say I agree with everything that was said before. I think that there should be a bi-weekly task force, because I think it said January 23rd is when they want the report. So from now, January 23rd, that's about 10 or 11 meetings, which isn't that big when you conceptualize it. Additionally, agreed with Lori in regards to education. How could you fault someone who doesn't know? Like sometimes people just don't know, and that's a problem that's here a lot. And I think a lot of the issues that come up are just problems of efficiency. Like there's no reason someone should go to Norwalk to Hartford to end up in Bridgeport. Like we could figure out plans to make things efficient, not only get food that's safe, but keep it safe and give it in a reasonable and timely manner to, help out. So there's no waste in that, where it's not just a grocery problem and not just an us problem. There's problems throughout the whole system that I think we can iron out to make it a more efficient system where people get food timely, safe, and equitable manner. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you. I think that conversation I had with you was actually with you about how food gets to where it gets and when it gets there. So thank you. And I think we're right on target. We also have Cindy Costa. Your hands up, Cindy.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think something to consider too, especially for grocery stores that are not familiar with donating, that they haven't been participating in that in the past. Just looking at their capacity for storing food safely until it can be picked up by whatever agency is going to be picking it up. So making sure the cold foods are kept cold, that they're protected from any potential sources of contamination. So just making sure, kind of like maybe a plan review type of thing for those grocery stores, making sure that they do have the capacity for that.
Thank you, Cindy. I agree. I was just thinking about the process. So it's uniform, that everyone is following a certain process and protocol on how the food gets to where it goes and what's acceptable to send out, and what breaking it down by categories of who can accept what. So I think we have a great place to start. You think so, Representative Moore?
Yeah, it sounds like, so everybody can't be on every subcommittee because that's a lot of work, right? So we have to kind of break up, divide, and then regroup, right? And have some takeaways. And it sounds like the first subcommittee is food safety. And I think it makes sense to have the Department of Public Health. I'd like to hear more about the regulations around food safety. I'm glad we have such good regulations, but want to hear from the organizations as to what might be the biggest challenge, and hear from Department of Public Health what is the biggest challenge you're seeing out in the at the supermarkets or out in the community. So I think the food safety subcommittee would be Department of Public Health, right? And then I'm thinking a regional organization and one of the local organizations to talk about the education about what could be donated, and the refrigeration and the challenges. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Chairwoman, but I believe DCP should be part of that as well.
Let me just interrupt for a moment too. I think for the food safety and the education, we should all hear the same information. So maybe, and we're just working this through, maybe the first meeting, that next meeting we have, is that we understand the protocols and the regulations. So we're all working from the same place, not coming up with something that's not going to be acceptable. And it's led by those people who do the food safety, DPH or whatever agency it is, that they're presenting what the rules are for the state of Connecticut, the guidelines, and then we work from there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we have Department of Public Health for our next meeting. If you're willing to present some of the high level regulations, and the purpose, right? I think we know the purpose, but it'd be a great to hear. Yep. And consumer protection. We'll hear from them as well. And then also to hear the challenges from those that are accepting the food, what you see as part of the regulations.
I think that makes sense. And then we could build from there the subgroups, but we know what we're looking for in the way of a subgroup. But I think we all need to have the same information going forward. So we're working from the same place and understanding what the restrictions are.
So are we establishing one subgroup at the moment to come back to our next meeting in 2 weeks?
I think it's not a subgroup. I think it's an informational session on what the guidelines are, that we all hear that first. And then from that, we work on the subgroups. And people can let us know. We can send out an email, let people know on those other areas we touched, where would their interest be? But I think for this first one, we all need to be together in the same room, hearing the same information.
Okay, yep, I see all that.
And I'm happy to provide anything that you like from, the General Feeding America standards, the USDA standards. I'm sure they're all in line with whatever we would get from DPH and consumer protection. But like I said, there's a lot of regulations. So be happy to present to you anything or provide you any information that could be helpful from the food bank's perspective.
That's great. I think that, certainly we don't want to alleviate the protection, but there might be some thoughts around streamlining in some places. So it's good to hear, from everybody on that aspect. And just so everybody knows, the reason we're going to meet every 2 weeks is because the bill says that we need to conclude by January 1, so that if there is any new potential legislation that comes out of this, we're prepared for the next session. So I think the next meeting is in 2 weeks, but just plan on, we'll send a schedule out every 2 weeks between now and December. I can't see that far. Jordan? Okay. Jordan has her hand up.
Yes, just briefly. I'm happy to participate in whatever way you think would be the most helpful on any of the subcommittees. So if that's all of them, I'm available. Just because I do think that it's important to understand some context. I'm really looking forward to the conversation about the regulation because, we find that we are not only regulated state and federally, but we have, as Jason mentioned, we have a third-party audit system that that we're very invested in and making sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. And so I think the education piece is incredibly important. And I neglected to mention in the beginning that we also do a huge educational piece with community partners. We go into the schools, into senior centers to talk about nutrition often. And we talk often about food equity. And so there are some additional resources that could be helpful to some of these conversations from our perspective, like to be able to, along with the Connecticut Food Association, offer the perspective of the grocers, because this is, one of our chief priorities. Thank you.
It would be great if for the next meeting, if you could bring a little bit more information about that. Sounds like a great model. And because we have the Supermarket Association on with us as well, it's potentially something we want to share best practices, right? So there's some supermarkets, I'll be honest, that are doing a great job, right? And there are some supermarkets that don't necessarily donate, I think, as much as they can. And I think we'll be able to maybe alleviate their concerns, right? And show them some best practices and some models so that going forward, they are more comfortable and they are connected to the right food organizations, food rescue organizations, so that we could get as many as possible. So any information that you have that you are doing that you can bring forward to the next meeting so we could talk about it. And then also, hang on a second, who was Wayne's designee?
Maggie.
Oh, there you go. Hi. From the Supermarket Association perspective as well, if you are able to maybe get your arms around any policies or any models that you're aware, because I know we're talking I know that Jordan is ShopRite, but your association includes a number of different chains. So any different models that you have as well that you want to bring forward to the next meeting that we could look at, that maybe others can emulate towards the end of the task force, that is really our goal, right? To get as many as we can donating and safely. So anything you from the Supermarket Association can bring forward. And I also, while we're talking about the Supermarket Association, I want to point out that the legislation, the definition of supermarket is any facility that has over 3,000 square feet of food retail. So when we talk about food resourcing and donating for food insecurity, we're not just talking about the Stop and Shop and the ShopRite and the Aldi's and the Trader Joe's. This also includes the Costco, the Target, the Walmarts, super Walmarts. We don't have them at the table. The Supermarket Association has a lot of the supermarkets under one umbrella. So it was easier to get one person here representing most of the supermarkets. It has been difficult for the big box stores because they're not in a big coalition. So they don't have one point person. So we need to work on getting those big box stores to the table as well, because that's a lot of food that we could get into the community as well.
Are there any more questions or comments? I don't see any hands up. So let's talk about.
I have a quick comment.
And Reggie?
Yeah, I think through all this, we should also think of, we should keep a way of accountability and this infrastructure in mind, because like Mike said, we could create a law, but if there's no one to actually do it, there's no point in doing all this work. So we should have in mind, like, how after we're done with this, what is going to be the group that actually like follows up? If there's going to be a group that follows up, how it's going to be done. So we literally just don't have a paper floating in the air.
You're talking more oversight?
Yeah, I think that should be something that's in the mind of a conversation, not in regards to it's no context in regards to the previous conversation, just a general comment. Oversight should be.
Thank you.
Important.
Anyone else?
Reggie, by oversight going forward, do you mean the ability to track what's being donated to ensure it continues to be donated? What do you mean by oversight? What are you thinking?
Well, that depends on what this task force ends up doing. Like, if that thing, for example, he said that when it goes in, it's one thing, when it goes out, it's something. Who's there to monitor that there is a go out, or there's people that are actually saying like, here, we have food, if you want to take it, and you're a food organization, you check all these boxes to take it. So it's not just groups that say like, okay, the law exists, but agree, like, don't do anything about it, I guess.
Got it. So
I'm like mumbling all over.
all of the recommendations that come out of the task force, how are we going to ensure that they continue and they're sustainable, and we don't walk away and it happens the first month or two and then it doesn't happen anymore?
Yeah, because I know with like some laws that came through, like some of these departments are kind of at capacity. So it is like, who's actually going to be doing it, who's going to be looking over, who's going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Very good. You know, I'm wondering, is it consumer protection or is it Department of Ag? So it is something we'll have to work out. Where will it fall? Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just currently the Department of Consumer Protection, we do regulate supermarkets and all packaged foods in Connecticut.
So you'll be able to guide us through that as we're doing this work, where will it fall, and to ensure that there is oversight and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we committed to an hour for this first meeting. And I think we have a great place to start, to begin, that we agree that we'll start with understanding the regulations, how we move forward with regulations to know what the standards are, correct? And then from there, we can figure out what the work groups are. I would hope we could make sure everybody has a copy of the current bill that created the task force. Also, if we can get the New York legislation so people could look at that ahead of time and read through that. And then if there are any other materials that people want to share, they come to the clerk to make sure everybody gets the same information. And we also need to solidify that we could have who's going to present at the next meeting in 2 weeks. And I believe we could do that offline, Representative Bora, on that agenda, but just know that we will be meeting in 2 weeks and every 2 weeks, and we're going to hold this meeting to an hour. And I look forward to the next meeting. And I really do thank all of you all for what you do to feed people, to keep people with nutritious food, and because it really is about having love for people when you think about food to sustain them. It is life. So Representative Bora.
Yes, thank you, Senator Moore, and thank you everybody for attending. I also want to just throw out one other takeaway for the next meeting. I would love to hear from the Supermarket Association and anybody else here who is part of the supermarkets. What are your additional challenges to donating? I know we talked about food safety, maybe refrigeration, storage, but what are some of the other challenges, so that, you know, just looking ahead to the next meeting, what else do we have to look at? So for example, you know, I've heard from supermarkets in the past that there's not maybe a consistent run that comes to the store every Saturday or every Tuesday, or, you know, there needs to be more structure around who will pick up and identification of who will pick up. So just want to hear about the other challenges besides food safety and storage as to what can be obstacles from the supermarkets to donate more excess food. Yes, we're adjourning. Okay. All right. So does anybody have anything else before we adjourn? So we'll be sending out an email with the New York law, right?
I
So
think
everybody take a
Jamie
look at
Smith.
Mike. Are you sending that to us?
Thank you, Reggie.
Jamie Smith has her hand up.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I just wanted to chime in and say we've done a number of grant programs recently that might offer some initial guidance or structure for the working group to consider. So we're not starting this from scratch for a grant program. if it does continue to move in that direction. And I also wanted to thank Virginia for chiming in. While our agency has been tasked with administering a grant program, I did want to just reinforce that DCP is the regulatory body for supermarkets and manufactured food products. So that's all. Thank you.
You know, that's going to be a great discussion between Department of Agriculture, Department of Consumer Protection, and some of the organizations to talk about what their needs are. So you have model grant programs. And then for this purpose, we want to hear what do they think would be the best usage of the funding? How can it best support the infrastructure on the ground, the capital needs of the resource organization? So that'll be another great discussion. And if you want to bring for the next meeting, I know we're loading up the next meeting already, but if you want to bring some of those thoughts around those model grant programs, I think we could start to look at those pretty soon. Anybody else have their hand up? It's hard for us to see while we're Zooming and in person.
There's no other hands up.
No hands up. Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you to everybody for coming, and this meeting's adjourned.